You've spent good money locking down a storage account or a key vault. You've configured firewalls, you set up role-based access control, you've got managed identities humming along nicely. Then someone looks at the resource and asks the awkward question. So this is still reachable from the public internet, right? In most default Azure deployments, the honest answer is yes. In this lesson, you'll learn 3 things. First, the 3 ways a platform resource can expose itself to the network, from wide open public access all the way to a genuinely private connection, and why DNS is the part that quietly breaks if you skip it. Second, how private link service flips the model when you're the one publishing an application rather than consuming one. Third, how Entra Private Access replaces the old-fashioned corporate VPN, and how conditional access now reaches all the way down into network traffic itself. Let's start with the 3 doors into a platform resource. Almost every Azure platform service ships with a public front door by default. Spin up a storage account, and its public hostname resolves to a Microsoft-managed address that's reachable from anywhere on the planet. The firewall on the account decides who's allowed through, but the door itself exists out in public. That's perfectly fine for a static website. It's a real problem for the database holding your payroll. So Azure gives you 3 ways to control how that door behaves. The first is public access protected by a firewall. The resource keeps its public hostname and its public address, but you list exactly which addresses are allowed to connect. Picture a nightclub that's technically open to everyone, but with a bouncer checking the guest list at the door. The second is a service endpoint, which extends your virtual network so that traffic heading to specific Microsoft services stays on Azure's own backbone instead of the open internet. The resource still keeps a public hostname, but when you connect from inside your virtual network, Azure quietly routes that traffic over its private network instead. The bouncer now recognizes your face and waves you through a staff entrance. You're still in the same building, you're just taking a different corridor to get there. The third is a private endpoint, which is a network interface living inside your own virtual network that represents the platform resource as if it actually lived in your network. The resource gets handed a genuine private address from your subnet. As far as your virtual machines are concerned, that storage account is now simply part of your network, like it always belonged there. Here's a quick tip. If a question asks which option keeps traffic completely off the public internet and uses a private address, service endpoints keep traffic private in transit, but the resource itself still sits behind a public address. Service endpoints are cheaper and simpler, but they leak a little, because the resource is still reachable by its public hostname. So a misconfigured application somewhere else in the world could still attempt to reach it. Private endpoints are the gold standard, and they're what this exam expects you to reach for whenever a scenario mentions regulated workloads, isolation, or a zero-trust posture. There's a cost angle worth knowing too. Service endpoints are free. Private endpoints carry a modest hourly charge per endpoint, plus a small fee based on data processed. That won't break most budgets, but it adds up once you're running hundreds of storage accounts, each needing separate endpoints for blob, file, queue, and table access. Here's one more wrinkle worth remembering. A single resource can expose multiple sub-resources, and each one needs its own private endpoint. A storage account, serving blob, file, and table traffic privately, needs 3 separate endpoints, 1 per sub-resource, each with its own DNS zone. Key Vault is simpler, since it only has 1 sub-resource. Azure SQL has its own single sub-resource too. Cosmos Database has separate endpoints per API. This exam loves testing whether you remember that 1 endpoint doesn't automatically cover an entire resource. Now let's talk about why private endpoints need DNS help, because this is the part that trips up almost everyone the first time around. A private endpoint gives your storage account a genuine private address, but your application doesn't automatically know that. Your application still connects using the same public hostname it's always used. That hostname, by default, resolves to a public address. If your application looks it up using ordinary public DNS, it'll get the public address back and try connecting across the open internet. The private endpoint exists, but absolutely nothing is using it. You need a private DNS zone, which is a DNS zone hosted inside Azure that overrides public lookups for any virtual network you link it to, in order to make that hostname resolve to the private address instead. but only for traffic coming from inside the virtual network. Microsoft publishes one zone per service. For blob storage, there's a dedicated zone. For Key Vault, there's a different dedicated zone. Every service gets its own. Here's how the chain actually works. Your application asks for the storage account's public hostname. Azure's public DNS hands back a pointer record, aiming at a special private link version of that same hostname. If your virtual network is linked to the matching private DNS zone, Azure resolves that second name to the private address. If it isn't linked, the lookup falls straight through to the public address, and you're right back to using the internet. Here's a heads up worth remembering carefully. This is the single most common private endpoint failure mode you'll see. The endpoint exists, the firewall is locked down tight, but traffic still flows over the public path, simply because the virtual network was never linked to the right private DNS zone. Always test name resolution from a virtual machine inside the virtual network before you declare victory. Compare this to installing a private side door in your office building, but forgetting to update the sides in the lobby. The door is there, it's locked and ready to use, but every visitor walks right past it, because every sign still points toward the main entrance. The good news is that when you create a private endpoint through the portal, Azure usually offers to handle that DNS plumbing automatically. The less good news is that in automated deployments, you have to wire it up yourself. This exam will absolutely test whether you know which zone belongs to which service. Here's a deeper detail worth knowing. Each platform service has a documented mapping between its public hostname and its private link subdomain. Blob storage maps to one zone, file storage maps to another, Key Vault maps to its own, and Azure SQL maps to yet another. And so on down the list. If you're deploying private endpoints at scale, it's worth building a reusable deployment template that takes a service name and automatically produces both the endpoint and the matching zone link. You'll be glad you did it the third time you need it. Now, let's flip the whole model around, because private endpoints work the other direction too. Private link service is what you reach for when you're the one publishing an application, rather than simply consuming one. If you've built an application running behind a standard load balancer, which is Azure's Layer 4 load balancer, with either a public or an internal front end, you can publish that application as a private link service, so your customers connect to it through their own private endpoints. This is actually how Microsoft exposes services like Azure SQL to your own virtual network in the first place. They run the real database behind their own internal load balancer. And Private Link Service makes that database appear as a private endpoint inside your network. You're now doing the exact same trick for your own applications. It's the corporate equivalent of letting a partner company's delivery van drive straight into your loading bay, instead of making their driver check in at the public reception desk. No internet hop, no leaking DNS, no firewall holes to punch open. You'd reach for Private Link Service if you're a software vendor exposing your product to enterprise customers who refuse to consume anything over the public internet. It's also genuinely useful inside a single organization when you need strict isolation between different business units. Now, let's flip the problem around one more time. Instead of cloud resources that need to stay off the internet, picture your user sitting at home or in a coffee shop, trying to reach an internal application that lives in a virtual network or on premises. The traditional answer used to be a VPN client on the laptop, a VPN box at the network edge, and an entire evening lost to certificate renewals. Entra Private Access is the modern replacement. It's Microsoft's identity-anchored remote access service, and it's part of a broader offering called Global Secure Access. It's what's known as an SSEE product, short for Secure Service Edge, which means the access decisions happen inside Microsoft's own network, rather than on a box you have to maintain yourself. Here's how it actually works, in plain terms. You install a lightweight client on the user's device. You deploy small connectors, which are lightweight services sitting inside your virtual network or your on-premises network, reaching outbound to Microsoft, next to whichever applications you want to publish. The user simply opens their internal application like normal. The client routes that traffic to Microsoft's edge. Microsoft applies conditional access, and then the traffic gets sent through the connector to the actual application. The user never gets a network-level tunnel into your entire corporate network. They get an authenticated, authorized, application-level tunnel to exactly the one application they're allowed to reach. If you've ever worked somewhere that handed every contractor's VPN a route straight into the production database subnet, you already understand why this distinction matters so much. Compare it to a corporate shuttle bus that picks an employee up from home and drops them at the door of one specific building. The bus doesn't hand out a master key to the entire campus. It checks identification at boarding, drives the correct route, and stops at exactly the right gate. Here's a quick tip. Private access connectors only ever reach outbound to Microsoft's Edge. They never require inbound holes punched in your firewall. That's a genuinely huge architectural improvement over legacy VPN boxes. Private access is only one half of global secure access. The other half, called Internet access, secures a user's outbound traffic to public websites and software-as-a-service applications. You can adopt either half independently, but most organizations eventually end up running both together. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting for security engineers. Because global secure access routes traffic through Microsoft, it can hand that traffic off to conditional access, the policy engine you may remember from an earlier lesson, on a per-application basis. That means you can write a conditional access policy stating that to reach the human resources application over private access, the device must be compliant according to Intune. The user must have completed phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication within the last hour, and the sign-in risk must be low. The policy engine evaluates all of these conditions on every single connection, not just once at login. That's a meaningful shift from how things used to work. Old VPNs gave you a binary yes or no decision at the front door, then trusted the connection blindly for hours afterward. Conditional access working through global secure access can step a user up to additional multi-factor authentication mid-session, the moment they pivot toward a more sensitive application. It can block the connection entirely if the device falls out of compliance while the session is still active. Here's the key thing to remember. Entra Private Access turns network access into an identity decision. The network doesn't grant trust based on where you happen to be sitting. It grants trust based on who you are, what device you're using, and exactly what you're trying to reach. For this exam, remember the shape of the whole stack. Global secure access is the umbrella term. Private access is the half handling on-premises and virtual network applications. Internet access is the half handling the public web. And conditional access is what makes the entire stack intelligent. They're not separate products bolted together after the fact. They're one stack, sharing one policy engine. There's also a useful side benefit worth knowing around source address visibility. Because traffic leaves through a known defined set of Microsoft Edge addresses tied to your own tenant, downstream applications and software-as-a-service platforms can allow list those specific addresses, instead of trying to keep up with the constantly shifting home broadband addresses of every remote user. That sounds like a small detail, but for vendors that gate access by source address, it's genuinely the difference between a smooth integration and an endless flood of help desk tickets. Here's a quick tip. If you're trialing global secure access, start with one low-risk internal application before going anywhere near your production human resources system. The user experience is genuinely good, but there's a real configuration learning curve, and you don't want to be discovering edge cases on the systems that matter most. Let's walk through the canonical hands-on pattern for putting storage and key vault behind private endpoints, since it ties everything in this lesson together. Imagine an Azure SQL database that needs to read a connection string from Key Vault and also needs to write backup files to a storage account. Neither resource should be reachable from the public internet at all. The recipe runs like this. Create a virtual network with a subnet for your workload and either a separate subnet or the same one for your private endpoints. Create the Key Vault with public access disabled and its firewall set to deny everything by default. Create a private endpoint for the Key Vault inside your virtual network, targeting its vault subresource. Create or reuse the matching private DNS zone for Key Vault and link it to your virtual network. Repeat that same pattern for the storage account, targeting its blob subresource and using the matching private DNS zone for blob storage. And finally, test name resolution from a virtual machine sitting in the workload subnet. Both host names should resolve to addresses inside your private endpoint subnet's range. If that DNS test comes back with a public address instead, your virtual network isn't linked to the right zone yet. Don't move forward until that's fixed, because everything downstream depends on getting this one step right. Here's a quick tip. Use the networking view on a resource in the portal to see every private endpoint attached to it, along with its connection state. If the state shows as pending or disconnected, that's exactly where to start your debugging. Here's a heads up worth remembering. Private endpoints don't replace the resource's own firewall. You still have to explicitly set the resource's public network access to disabled. Otherwise, both paths stay open at once. The endpoint adds a private path in addition to the public one. It doesn't close the public one for you automatically. Once this is all in place, the workload talks to both services entirely over private addresses. You can disable the resource firewalls completely if you want, because nothing outside your virtual network can reach them anyway. Backups flow privately, secrets get fetched privately, and your network diagram finally looks like the one you sketched out on the whiteboard during the design review. One last gotcha worth mentioning. On-premises servers connected to Azure over a VPN or ExpressRoute also need to resolve those private link host names correctly. Private DNS zones are linked to Azure Virtual Networks by default, but your on-premises DNS servers have no idea those zones even exist. The usual fix is a small DNS forwarder virtual machine running inside Azure, or a managed Azure DNS resolver service that your on-premises DNS conditionally forwards the right queries to. Without that piece, your on-premises application traffic will resolve the public hostname, hit the public address, and simply bounce off the resource's own firewall. The endpoint is fine, the storage account is fine, but the name resolution path in between is broken. Let's review what we covered in this lesson. Public endpoints, service endpoints, and private endpoints are three escalating levels of network isolation, and private endpoints give you a genuine private address inside your own virtual network, entirely off the public internet. Private DNS zones are what actually make private endpoints work, and without the correct zone linked to your virtual network, traffic silently falls back to the public path, which is why you always test name resolution first. Private link service flips the whole model, letting you publish your own application so customers consume it for their own private endpoints. Entra Private Access replaces the legacy VPN, routing traffic through Microsoft's Edge, applying conditional access per application, and never handing out a wholesale network tunnel. Global Secure Access is the umbrella covering private access for internal applications and internet access for outbound web traffic, both driven by conditional access. And the canonical pattern for storage and key vault is always the same. Disable public access, attach a private endpoint, link the correct private DNS zone, and test resolution from inside the virtual network before you celebrate. Let's do a quick self-check. First question. An application still resolves the storage account's hostname to a public address, even though a private endpoint has already been created for it. What's the most likely cause? The virtual network isn't linked to the correct private DNS zone for that service, so the lookup falls through to the public address instead of the private one. Second question, what's the key architectural difference between a legacy VPN and Entra Private Access? A legacy VPN grants a broad network-level tunnel into the corporate network after a single login, while Entra Private Access grants an authenticated, per-application tunnel evaluated continuously through conditional access, with connectors that only ever reach outbound to Microsoft. Third question, a vendor wants enterprise customers to consume their application without ever touching the public internet, and the vendor is the one publishing the service. Which feature should they use? Private link service, which lets the publisher expose an application behind a standard load balancer, so customers connect to it through their own private endpoints.